It's usually the thing I think it's gonna be really easy, like a pose. I'm like, oh, I got this. Like I've done this before, and it's like, no, this is gonna be attempt 15. Please, please, I just want to get done with this drawing. And that happens sometimes. Um, but it's funny. Usually, like if I'm doing what I think I should be doing, the first attempt, the first thing I want to do is usually the way to go with it.
Welcome back to Inspired Inc., the CWS podcast, a show where we promote indie comic creators and become inspired by what they create and their journey of creating it. I'm your host, Brandon Bloxdorf, and today on the show, we have creator Tony McMillen joining us. And we talk about Tony's unique way of approaching his inking, why every idea you have will advance you, and how the more you know, the more you could pull from to inspire your work. All of this and so much more on today's Inspired Inc. Man, speaking of like comics and like style and whatnot, dude, you like Tony McMillen making the dopest looking indie comics and your style, it reminds me a lot, especially with this move I'm doing and going through all my books and I'm looking at all my like all these creators and style is one of the biggest things as an artist especially, and you're like a Jack Kirby of comics, the way you've kind of reconstructed figures and like put them together with, and we'll talk about the pins you use and everything, but where did this sense of style come from? What inspired you to get that going? Because that's what got my attention when I saw you.
Oh, thank you very much. I don't know. I guess I love Jack Kirby, but I like a lot of different artists, and I was always drawn to really distinct styles. And of comic books, especially as a kid, exaggerated superheroes and kind of dynamic posing, like Frank Miller's posing is something I always was like drawn to. He'd always draw, even if some of his line work can be ugly, I think in a good way. The
Mhm.
figures, they're posed so heroically or so just dramatically, and I really was drawn to that. And then as I got a little older, I be into like Eric Larson, and then I got into like Frank Miller, or sorry, Jack Kirby through that. And Jack Kirby was the
Mm.
king of these poses, like just the foreshortening, the everything was just cranked to 11, and I really really was drawn to that. And I think it's continued, even quieter art. I'm like, it'd be like Sam Keith can have some quiet moments and like the
Mm.
Max, people are just talking, but there's always something really cool and weird about the way they're crouched or their heads down just in a certain way. It all looks really like thoughtful, or at least there's some choices being made. He isn't just dashing it off. And like if you're gonna draw somebody jumping over like a building, make it the coolest way you could do that. And I think that's what I respond to. So I try to do that.
Man, yeah, that's so great because yeah, dramatic. That's what it is. I love that. Like using that term for this, like dramatic posing. And it's not violent, but it's full of action. And that's what's cool about it.
Yeah, and I think exactly there's a big difference there. And I can do violent stuff too. I enjoy that, but action is its own thing.
Yeah,
You can draw someone reaching for their keys in a really exciting way,
yeah.
and I think unless it detracts from the story you're telling, you might as well make it interesting or cool. Like movie wise, I love when you can feel the camera's presence. Like I love early Sam Raimi, like Evil Dead 2,
Mm.
or even like the Coen brothers also in like Raising Arizona, where the camera's just moving around and flying around. So everything's heightened and weird, and I love that. So most of my stuff, I think I'm trying to do something like that, where I'm just kind of like I want people to pay attention to the way I am showing them these events and people.
How do you start your process with all this? Like, where do you go to start figuring out, do you start from front to back, like when you're doing your layouts and like trying to construct to build the background? Like, where do you start when you start working on a page or a piece?
So I actually think for me, in my process, the less I labor over something, it usually is the better. Usually my first impulse is mostly the right one. So I'll do very, very loose thumbnails on a piece of typing paper. They're just like the layout, like, okay, this arrangement of rectangles and boxes and stick figures seems good. And then I'll do really, really loose pencils and a blue pencil on the paper. And I try not to if I can get away with it, not too many facial expressions or anything else like that, because I think overthinking it, the line gets kind of dull, and so the inking is really where I'm drawing. So um, I think for most of my stuff, that's where I do most of the actual work. And a lot of times I'm improvising with the page, and so I draw in a very loose style, and so sometimes things happen which I was not planning for, there, i.e., mistakes, and I try to roll with it as best I can, and sometimes great things happen. I did a page of my book series Creatures, and it's supposed to be a cool skull image with the main character Bobby's glasses, and I screwed up. I just looked terrible, and I was actually really I don't really get like this. I got frustrated, and so I scribbled over, I scratched over really hardcore with my pen, and ink was splattered everywhere, and all of a sudden I did something. I was like, wait, I get this. Actually, I can make this work now. I can salvage this. And I added some white out, and it just kept on throwing things on top of it. All of a sudden, I was like, oh, this is great. This is better than what I was gonna do originally. And that was a great, that was a great instance of this process working. Sometimes I just screw up and I go, oh, I gotta start again. But I think for the most part, I'm good at walking a tightrope, and just it's like I play music. It's when you're jamming with somebody, there might be it's only a bad note if the next note you do doesn't sound good. If someone does something weird, you play with it. It just might be, oh, cool. We're doing this now. We're moving left, not moving right. If you can roll with it, all of a sudden you and the audience might not even know any better. It's like, oh, this sounds awesome. I love how they twisted it around. They curved it.
That's awesome, dude. Talk about like happy accidents kind of like shaping your artwork and really just running with the passion that comes out of that, you know? I mean, that page just sounds like it was frustrating. It captivated you. You just like tired of it. But out of your like literally Vader out of his, coming up out of it, like his passion, you destroyed it and you created this beautiful thing out of it. And it made it better. That's insane. That's cool as hell.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's one of my favorite instances, and it happens once in a while, stuff like that. But one of the things I think that helps me with this sort of thing is like when I draw a comic book page, I do use a pencil. I pencil in some the rough layouts. But when I draw, usually I just draw straight to ink, and I've been doing this for
Yeah.
years, and so that's really honed my ability to kind of improvise and play and roll with things. And so a lot of times, I use a Pilot Parallel pen, which is a chisel tip. It's flat, and one of the things I love about it is I can make a mark, and I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm just making a big mark, a big smudge, and I'll look at it and go, what does that look like? And a lot of times I go, oh, it looks like parts of a face or parts of a finger or parts of a figure, or even sometimes like a tree or a house. And then I'll just try to kind of chisel out the rest of it. But the initial inspiration is just an accident. I'm just kind of, it's like, I don't want to belabor the musical metaphor, but it's just hitting a guitar, and the first thing you hit, go, what is that chord? Oh, that's cool. And then what does that inspire? What's the next thing you play? And
Mhm.
so that keeps it fun and playful. And I think that I think usually you can tell if an artist is having fun on a page. Like and that's that the mileage may vary in people, but I really respond to that. I respond to that in most art where it's like, oh, they're having a gas. That's cool. And I try to do that with my stuff. And don't get me wrong, like there's definitely times where it's usually the thing I think it's gonna be really easy, like a pose. I'm like, oh, I got this. Like I've done this before, and it's like, no, this is gonna be attempt 15. Please, I just want to get done with this drawing. And that happens sometimes. Um, but it's funny. Usually, like if I'm doing what I think I should be doing, the first attempt, the first thing I want to do is usually the way to go with it.
That's so cool. It's kind of like when you're staring out to like a wall or like, those popcorn ceilings and you start seeing images. That's what it reminds me of. You're just seeing, staring into the clouds and letting your imagination just run wild.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because there's a page in my book series Creatures where the character is literally doing that, and the word for it is called pareidolia. And he's literally looking at the popcorn ceilings. There's different kinds, and one's called California Knockdown. And the book is a lot about California. I was like, oh, it's a great name. And I used to live in Arizona, so we had those kind of ceilings in all of my apartments.
Mhm.
And he's literally looking at faces, and I had to figure out a way to draw that, which was hard for me. So I figured out smudging white out and a bunch of weird smudges, and eventually it looked kind of like that when I put it in the page. But I do it all the time. Like in the bathroom, I look at the floor, the ceiling, nonstop. I look at trees. I always see gnarled, weird faces, and sometimes I'll try to actually recreate those on page. But I think that's superhuman. I think that like people explain it, and I'll buy it. That people they go, like, oh, as a human, you try to recognize human faces or any sort of face, because in ancient times we want to make sure we're not going to be eaten or someone's going to try to attack us, and that's why when we look at a car, we think the lights look kind of like eyes and the girl looks like a mouth, and
Yep.
either if that's, that's not true, I'll buy that. That's why we're doing it. But I'm trying to use that for my advantage, and I think that's really fun. So basically, that's what I'm doing. I make a few smudges, and I look at it like it's popcorn ceiling, and I'll go, what do I see? And then I try to make the rest of it.
Oh, man, that's cool. And I mean, talk about like, we always talk about music on the show and how I grew up as a musician and I studied music forever. And there's that awesome Victor Wooten quote where he's saying something like, you're only one wrong note, or only, yeah, only one note away from the right note. And that's just like,
Right.
if you make a mistake, all you have to do is just one step forward and you're in the right spot. And it sounds like that's the way your art is that it starts with the right note and it could go into something funky where you're figuring out, but then you find the click, and that click, by not stopping yourself and being like, this is trash, like I don't know what I'm doing, you're pushing past that wrong note and prevailing through it, which a lot of people get stuck at. They get stuck at the wrong note and are just like, this is bad, this is wrong, I can't do this. And you go push yourself past that and experiment more and let those wrong notes kind of create your art, which is, mesmerizing.
Thank you. And I very much agree with everything you just said. I think also, especially when you're first starting out as a creator, I think one of the things that reminds me of is I think people you've developed taste probably as a reader because you've read a bunch of
Mhm.
stuff. You know what you like. You know what you think works. You develop taste, but maybe you haven't developed your ability to create art that reaches your own tastes. Like you go, I want to buy this. I don't like this. It's not as good as the things I think are good, and so people get they get kind of shut down by themselves. They go, well,
Mhm.
I can't be as good as whoever your favorite creator is or whatever. And so you stop trying. But I think if you push through that and you keep on practicing, just making comics, eventually, I'm not sure if you're ever going to reach, what you think the best art is, but you will get past a barrier and go, okay, this is good enough that I actually, maybe I would buy this, or maybe I will at least read this and enjoy this, or I think there's potential. And that's, with music too, like, I'm always I like to write songs, and like you said, like there's plenty of times where you're making a song up and you hit these two chords as work, and you're like, this I know I can hear it should be this. I just don't know where it is. And I'm moving around the fretboard, just looking around for it, looking, singing, changing it. In art and comics the same way, even story elements where it's like, well, I know this starts here and I want to get to here, or I feel like this is the middle part, but there's something that needs to happen. These characters need to do something. And you're like, I'll know it when I get there. I'll know it when I think of it. And you just kind of have to play around. And the beauty part is, you don't have to show anyone anything until you think it's ready. So
It's
you
true.
could, and like my pages, there are plenty of pages where I'm like, this is bad. This is objectively not good. Great. No one was ever going to see this, but I hopefully have learned something from that, and I can move on to the next thing and try to do it better. And it's also funny. I've been doing comics, I guess, for 7 years, maybe 8 years, and at this point, I've done enough where some people will like some of my early stuff, maybe more than the newer stuff. And to me, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? I'm better now. But I'm like, oh, this is like me and like certain artists, certain bands, certain directors. There's a
Yeah.
period I like the best, and that's kind of neat to be on the other side of that and go, okay, well, I mean, cool. I guess I'll just keep on improving and making you like me less and less. But I'm really glad you like that early stuff. That's cool.
There's so much to unpack there. Yeah, dude, definitely. And when you think about, style and progressing, look at what Miller was doing, in his early Daredevil, where he was like penciling everything very, Neil Adams traditional like comic book style before he created that like uniqueness that we see in Dark Knight. And then the more uniqueness that we saw in like Dark Knight 2 and Ronin and things like that. And even his current drawings and like Kirby in the very beginning before he started doing, his early Marvel stuff versus like his New Gods, where it's just bombastic and all over the place in his later Marvel, like just enduring a style and just like figuring it out as you go. And you're not going to figure it out unless you do more work, like you said. Like you just have to keep chiseling and figuring it out and learning what your hand is trying to like spit out and create, and accepting what your hand is like producing at that point too.
Yeah, and I think also like I've written prose novels too, and part of what that taught me before I start really attempting comics was it's okay. Like you're gonna have to like think of like 20 or maybe more 100 bad ideas before you get to something which is probably decent. And the more you finish things, less precious you are about work. You're like, okay, it's cool. This won't be the only comic I ever do. I'll do another one, and maybe that will be better. It's okay if this one isn't perfect. It's okay if this one's a little weird. You never know. And another thing I learned from doing all these creative things is one of the coolest things you can do is you do some art, even a drawing, a scribble, something, and you just don't like it. It didn't look like the way you thought of it would be. And then you just take a week, take a month. You'll go through it, and you'll forget what your original idea was, and you just look at it for what it is, and go, oh, I really like this. And I've had things where like I actually have like the deja vu. I'm like, okay, I remember hating this, but I don't care anymore. I really, really enjoy this, and that's awesome. Like that's a great feeling. It's hard to remember, but sometimes I think you have to keep that in your back pocket and be like, it's okay. Like just let it sit for a while, come back to it, and see what you think. I mean, like I know Jimi Hendrix had this thing where he's always been like a super humble dude. You know, he's Jimi Hendrix, but someone's like, you know, I think someone gave him a compliment. He's like, you know, honestly, like the stuff I hear in my head, I can't play that I wish I could play. He's like, that's what, you know, that's what I'm reaching for. And the way he was saying it was sort of like, I'm sorry. Like he's been really like, I'm really trying. And it's like, it's okay. Like,
Yeah, you're slaying it right now.
yeah, yeah.
You're
We're fine with the output. Trust us. But I think about that. Like even when I get frustrated, I'm like, hey man, I'm sure everyone who I look up to, their stuff that I would think is like their masterpiece. Like, I can see the warts. I can see all these flaws. And so I think people have to push through that. And I think indie comics, especially, you know, of all the things we just talked about, like you're doing this probably by yourself, or at least you're doing parts of it isolated. You're drawing it. You're working a writer. You should be trying to have fun, because you're going to be spending hours doing this thing, doing something you care about. And it's okay if it's not like it's not your magnum opus, because I think this loosening up, it's like you get pressure on yourself, too much pressure, it's gonna be horrible, and you probably won't have the best work. You just chill out a little bit, give it a few tries if you need to. I think you're gonna be way happier and you think your output's gonna be better. Personally, that's what I think.
And I don't think anyone, you know, any of our big creators that we admire, and when they did their biggest, best work, they weren't going into that room being like, this is it. This is the time I'm going to write my biggest, most achieving thing in the world. And this is going to be the ultimate. It's like they went into that room and were like, I'm going to make another project and I'm going to do my best. And I hope it comes out the best it can. And guess what? Sometimes it just changes like the landscape of like the universe. And sometimes it doesn't, which is fine, because even the ones that don't change the landscape of the universe are probably even better than the ones that did, because they just went under the radar and let your work come out. I was working on a zine recently from a bunch of old drawings I did from my first live drawing show we did a couple years ago on Apollo. And, you know, I didn't really care for the drawings. I just thought they'd be scratch stuff. Just that I learned, I was practicing. But then I was like, I want to learn how to make a zine. So I went back and looked at all these old drawings, rescanned them, and put them into my computer and my iPad and worked on them for a bit. And, you know, I redesigned it on Procreate, and I'm just like blown away by like what the outcome is. And there was even some pieces where I was like talking to my girlfriend. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I think I'm gonna have to trash this one. It doesn't fit. I can't figure it out. But I would step away for a few days, step away for a week, and then relook at it and be like, oh, this all makes sense now. I could just, all right. And then it just clicks. You just got to rest and take a break, come back to it. Years, months, weeks, days. Sometimes like a project just needs to sit for a little bit.
Yeah, and everything you're saying, that I respond to that really positively, because like to me it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Everything's a little jigsaw puzzle. I'm just waiting for these pieces to fall in place. And like you said, sometimes it's years. And that's like I did a book called Attaboy, and Attaboy, the initial idea was like, oh, it'd be cool if there was a comic book which was actually like designed like a video game manual, but it was still a story. And I had that for a long time, and I just didn't know what to do with it. And eventually a couple other things came into my mind. I was like, wait. And then I knew when it was time. It was like a pot cooking, and like, oh, it's percolating. It's percolating. It's like, oh, it's boiling now. It's tossing the noodles. It's time now. And I knew it wasn't time yet. And so I'm really glad I learned to be patient. I think part of being confident enough to be patient is knowing, oh, I have other ideas. And if these things aren't ready yet, maybe they'll be ready later. Or if they're not, that's okay. Like I remember years ago, Grant Morrison had this documentary, which is really great.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? What's it
Something with
called?
the
It's
gods.
yeah,
Walking
yeah,
with gods or
exactly.
something like that. Something like that. Yeah, it's on YouTube. You can find it anywhere. Yeah,
Right. It's
talking
fantastic.
with
And
gods.
Grant,
Talking with gods. That's what it is. Yeah.
oh, I was gonna say God's definitely, you're right. But they had this thing where they said they showed their they had these little journals full of ideas, like tons of ideas for Batman and a million, and they were like, I honestly have too many ideas. I won't have time to do all these because I'm getting older, and it's just that's just life. I have them, and new ideas are always coming in, and I was like, oh wow. And at the time, I was a little younger. I first saw that, I was like, oh man, that's got to feel awesome. And I get older, I'm like, it's awesome, but it's also I'm sure it's bittersweet, but
Yeah,
it's
it kind of
okay.
hurts sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, because you know what can you do? But at the same time, that's okay. It's okay. I still write down ideas if I have them, but I've learned more and more. It's like, well, I think if they're really good ideas, I won't lose them. If they're
Hmm.
the ones I'll be working on, I'll just keep on. There's it's like they'll stay in your mind, and so it's I'm not such a fanatic about writing ideas down as much, at least now.
Yeah, right. Because you know if it's gonna stick, it's in your head and it won't leave. It's a story you need to get out, and you get to a point to where like life is gets more complex than it was when you started making comics and
Right.
working on art. You get older, things get busier, and you just have to like if it's still there, it needs to come out. I actually that's really cool you say that. I'm working on a story right now, and it was a story I thought of in 2015 when I was first trying to be like I'm declaring myself a writer and not a musician anymore, and it just like I for one I knew I wasn't like smart enough to write it, and I didn't know how to like tell that story, and then I couldn't figure out like a creative team to work on it. And actually last night I got the letters back for the first mini we're doing for this series, and I was just like ready to cry because it's like dude, it's 2024, 9 years I've had this like idea of the broadcast dialogues in my head, and I'm now finally for the first time seeing it come to life in front of me. Dude, sometimes you just got to hold on and like the timing will line up and like the ideas, inspiration, it'll happen. You just, if it's that good of an idea, you're going to want to make it at some point.
Well, right on. I'm super happy for you. That sounds great. Like it's got to feel good creatively to know it's time now and everything, and you
Yeah.
waited, and yeah, that's awesome. Like that's what you want out of these things. You want it to feel right, and yeah, 9 years is a long time, but it's hey, it's time now, and like I think that's really
Hmm.
smart that you were aware. Like I'm not ready yet to do it, and like I've had things like that where I'm like I don't know if it was I wasn't really if life experience yet to tell a story like
Yeah.
this, or
Big aspect too.
yeah, big time, and like there's pros and cons for doing a story at any point in your life. You might have more just raw energy when you're younger, maybe, but
Hmm.
maybe it's better to be tempered by life experience or just more actual practice doing your craft. Who knows? Um, I've always been kind of curious about like I don't know if I'll ever do it, but it'd be kind of cool to have like a story that I redo every like 15 years and see what the different version would be. Because a lot of my stories, I think a lot of people do this. They're what your person has seen. It's not the first draft. In my mind, I've done
Yeah.
like 8 versions of this story. It's been recombobulated and stuff like that. So maybe 15 years down the line, I'll do another version of it. Like I always think that'd be kind of neat. Like but we'll see. I'm not going to force myself to do it. Like I don't have this great big like timeline. Like I have to achieve all these things. I think as a kid I used to draw those. I used to like write down like so my fifth album will be this, and like
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I was really invested in the story of things. And I used to even write down like no one will like this third movie I make, but the fourth one will people reassess it, and like I wrote down like my own pitfalls, and now that I'm doing stuff, it's like well you just kind of do what you think
Yeah.
is ready, and it's hard to really mastermind all that stuff. So
I totally resonate with that. I had a whole back in the day when I had the broadcast dialogues planned. I was like, okay, so I have the novel I'm working on with the short stuff. I got my due dates there. I'm going to be working on the soundtrack after that, and then we're going to be shooting a short film, and it's going to incorporate this and bridge over to here to the comic. And I was like, none of that happened, but hey, I was ambitious, like
no, no, totally. Like I do a podcast called 5 Star Autopsy, and it's about the careers of creators. And I don't I jokingly look at it almost like it's a sport, like when they have a dip and they when their trajectory
Mm,
goes off. But I don't really believe in that. And that podcast is not really about that. But I think it is interesting to look at a career and go, okay, so this is like a jaw-dropping debut, and then they have a misstep, but then they come back, or this is the weird curveball and no one liked it first, but now people go, oh, it's a classic. That stuff's interesting. But I will say, just being out there a little bit more as a creator myself, it's a little less fun. Like, I love John Carpenter's The Thing. It's one of my favorite movies.
Oh,
It was a
yeah,
huge
same.
flop. It kind of ruined, yeah, kind of ruined his career. And I love that story. It's very dramatic. But
Mhm.
as a creator, I'm like, oh man, that must have really, really hurt. It's like,
Dude, right?
yeah, yeah. It's got a really, like, it's like Weezer, Pinkerton. Like, it's cool now. Like, yeah, man. Initially everyone hated it, and like Rivers was really getting personal. Now it's like, that's cool, but I'm sure it did really kind of sting.
Yeah, dude, and it trips me out that The Thing is like was like a flop because, dude, that movie has inspired me in so many ways, and it's one of my tops with the practical effects. And I have a board game of it. I have an art book of it. Like,
Awesome.
I'm a huge fan of it. And but yeah, when you're making something and you're pouring it like your soul out into it, and then it just like doesn't get a reception, sometimes that does like feel kind of heartbreaking. But then it's like, especially when you're on a commercial status, I'm sure that's even bigger spotlight on you. And
Right.
as indie creators, luckily we're just like, well, I guess I just gotta brush it off and hopefully it catches up to people and just keep on making art and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. Obviously, everyone wants a bigger audience, wants more exposure. But one of the positives is, like, yeah, if you have something that is maybe a flop or just wasn't looked at least you didn't fail, I guess, in front of the whole world, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's tricky. Like, I did I published this trilogy of novels all at once a few years ago, and this is something I worked on for, like, I don't know, 14 years, something off and on. And I'm still very proud of them. But yeah, no one really didn't really make much of a fuss, and that's okay. Like, hopefully someday people go back to those things. But I think at that point, my audience is comic book audience, and
Mhm.
my pro stuff hasn't reached what I've reached with comic books. Not that I'm raking in the dough, but it's one of those things that was another kind of reminder. Like, yeah, these people, they're not going to just jump on anything I do. They want comic books from me, and that's fine. It's totally valid.
Yeah, it's like kind of like with me and music. You know what I mean? Like I felt like my music career, I thought that was like my big. I was like, I should be breaking boundaries with this. And then you kind of start doing stuff and you're like, I'm not making any dents. And I feel like I've made a bigger wave in comics in the past year or so that I've been publishing than ever in my like 10 years of doing music did I ever make like a similar like splash and like, get that type of attention and community formed around me.
Right. And I'm guessing the answer is yes, but I'm hoping that you really love doing comics then, at least, right? It isn't
Oh,
like a
dude.
consolation prize. It's like, okay, this is great.
Yeah, and it's cool because when you grow up, you kind of realize, I don't know, I feel like, comics, especially being a musician, it's a great retirement thing. You retire from music and blend into this because now it's going on tour, but not with the whole band. Like you could just take
Right.
the one person on tour and hit a convention and do whatnot. And you could kind of navigate different stuff, like different projects, I think, as different bands. They all have a different sound, they all have a different flavor. I have like my big main project, which is Teenage Babylon, and that's like my big scope of everything. Which, speaking of like life experience, I don't think I'd ever be able to write Teenage Babylon without having some of the life experiences I had in the last couple years that really just like it clicked. And when I went back to that story, when I found the right artist, it just got to pour out of me. So sometimes that life experience, you just need to just live and grow, and that's going to really fuel your story. But yeah, that band mindset, beautiful. Like it's just it applies. You get lessons from one craft and you carry it over to the next, both the wins and losses. And if you keep that going and keep it that student mindset, you're just always going to be progressing, I feel.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's also, I guess, it's like I have almost no choice but to compare music to comics because they're the things I've done probably the most. But
Hmm.
yeah, like one of the things I've learned was writing lyrics was a really good training ground for writing comic books because you only have so much space in both, and writing lyrics, you have your number of syllables and things that will fit what your melody is. And so comic books, you literally have so much space and you have to know about like the cadence of the story. And that was, I think, a pretty good place to kind of improve on those skills, not knowing that later on I'd do that. Like, one thing I would change is, as a kid, I would have paid attention during handwriting because I
Dude,
do hand
same.
letter. And I was like, my teacher's like, dude, I'm never gonna do. Who cares? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, we got computers. This is stupid. What are we doing? We're wasting our time. And I picked like the one profession where it might matter.
Yep, exactly. I
Yeah.
feel the same way. My handwriting is horrific, and I'm like, man,
Yeah.
if I would have just trained and just been more adamant, but I was like, sloppy handwriting's kind of cool, you know? And no, backfires as a comic book creator, unless you're going for interesting font. I mean, hey, there's that aspect too, you know?
Sure, sure. But yeah, I think so. I spent way as a kid. I was like, I'm going to focus on drawing my scroll, my last name. That will look pristine. As long as my McFarlane scroll looks awesome, everything else does not matter. I won't focus on this or that. And I don't. I barely ever write my name on my art anymore. I always forget to do that on the covers and stuff. People always tell me, I'm like,
Oh,
well, at least my thumbprints are actually on it because I use my thumbprint as a textures.
oh, rad.
But
Yeah.
I literally forget to sign anything. It happens all the time.
You know, David Lujan, he's an awesome creator. He does a comic called Narita and Yuriko. And he also does that thumbprint technique where he uses his thumbprint and uses it as like the backgrounds of everything. And, you know, and you're the second creator I've heard kind of doing that. I think that's such a fun and excellent way to like build. There you go. Yeah. The dirty
Yeah.
hands is the best way. You know what I mean? And I think I think that's mind blowing, dude. Like, how do you incorporate your thumbprint into your art?
Yeah, so it can be for a lot of things. A lot of times, it's really good for a little texture on a face, like just a little smudge, a little bit on the nose and cheekbones. That kind of brings that out. But it can be clouds. You do a bunch smudge together. But usually, like if you draw like say like a deltoid muscle, and where the deltoid, the little bit of shadow would happen right there. Just put a
Hmm.
smudge of. It's kind of perfect. 'Cause there's one spot that's really dark where the most ink is, and the rest of it just kind of feathers around this little weird little maze, and it's very small, but I love doing that. I'm trying to think. I think the first time I saw someone do it, and I realized that's what I've been looking at is like Sean Gordon Murphy. I think he
Oh,
did a video, and I was like, oh my god, that's like that's. I looked at some of his characters. I'm like, how are you getting these tiny tiny lines on their face? This panel's pretty small. Like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, oh. That looks awesome, easy. And then eventually I went back and figured out Sergio Topi might have been one of the first guys who made that really popular. And but I love it. I that's one of my I love that trick. And like I have friends who are artists who are much cleaner than me, and they like are aghast at my hands at a convention. They're like, I can't even look at you. Just wash your hands. I'm like, oh, this is I like wear this proudly. Like, no, 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 disgusting. Go.
I love it. I love ink all over my hands, especially because I'm a lefty. So, you know,
Oh wow,
I'm
yeah,
also learning how to progress from right side of the page to the left. Because when I go from left to right, how I'm used to, I'm smearing everything. It does give it a fun texture sometimes for sure. You know what I mean?
right.
But my whole hand is just drenched in ink top to bottom when I'm doing stuff like that, which is, I think it's fun. It's playing in mud. You know, you're a kid. You're just having fun in your playground, you know?
No, totally. I feel like sort of like a craftsman or something. I feel like a
Yeah.
guy who worked, really hard. Or, I've had a few like blue collar jobs, but it's definitely better to have a cushy job, which I have now. But I do like having my hands dirty a little bit. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. It's one of those things, even, you know, as a musician, I was always very pristine about my hands. I was very cautious, very careful. Like I can't mess them up. Like a bass player, I use every finger in some essence, you know?
Right.
But the more I get involved with art, and now I have like a bit of a rougher day job and everything. But it's just like carrying stuff around and getting my hands moving and like walking into work with my hand covered in ink. I'm like, I've already had a day. You know what I mean? Like I've been at it.
I remember like I worked 6 years at a warehouse, medical warehouse, moving stuff, and so I did eventually have a little bit of calluses on my hand, and I was kind of secretly like, hell yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, and then like I swear, like within 3 months of not working there, like it all went away. I had like the
Gone. Yeah.
softest like hands. I was like, oh, welcome back. It's nice to have these again, I guess.
I feel you there. Yeah, honestly, the gym helped me like roughen them up a bit too, and that was I. Once I stopped working out for a while this year, I've just been like, well, when I get back, they'll look cool again. But I have soft
Right.
hands now. And you know, talking about like you mentioned it earlier, it's just like indie comics and how expressive they could be and what you're able to do. I think you're a great example of like when you look at indie comics and you could see the freedom you could have within it and the textures and the styles and everything and like how it just stands so far apart and so, you know, more unique than, you know, a lot of the house styles we see with like bigger companies and everything. When you started going towards like your inking process, you know, you're primarily, like you were saying, that's where your art really comes to life. And that's like the most permanent part. That's the part where people get intimidated and scared to go over their pencils with ink. What does that like kind of make it easier for you knowing that this is here, this is permanent, everything that happens is happening, and there's like almost not a way to stop it, and that like cements your art a bit faster?
I think so. I think it's one of those things, that classic thing of limitations breeds creativity, and
Hmm.
it's also, it's just like, no, like you said, knowing that, hey, this is it. Like you did it. That ink is, it's on there. Like it's sort of, and it's like, it's almost like trying to at best, when it's really flowing right in my mind, it's intuitive. I'm not second guessing myself. I'm just kind of rolling with it. That's the best feeling, and I can get there really easily just drawing in a sketch pad. Doing a
Hmm.
page, I have to sometimes just chill out a little bit and just go like, okay, it's just have some fun, see what happens. And I usually get there, but it's a little tricky because I know I'm like, okay, well, I spent some time drawing these pencils. I really want this to work and all this stuff, but it's best to shut it off. But one of the things I think I figured out early on, which is good, is like when it comes to style, I love distinct styles. I love to, in anything, singers, directors, artists. I like people who look like them, or their work just looks like them. And I learned I'm actually a bad parrot. I'm a bad imitator. Even when I try to do something like somebody, I could show you like, this is my John Romita Jr. and you're like, no, it's not. It's really not. It doesn't look like anything like that. And that's good. I learned,
Yeah.
like, one of the things I think about is Hank Azaria from The Simpsons had this thing about half the voices he does on The Simpsons are bad impressions of celebrities. Like his Mo is actually his Al Pacino. It's just not that
Oh
good,
my gosh.
and it eventually mutates into its own thing. His I think it's Lou the Cop is actually his Sylvester Stallone, and you can
Oh
kind of
my
hear
gosh.
it. That's a
Yeah, I
starting
can see
point.
that.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of my art is actually like, oh, this is me trying to do a Frank Miller, trying to do an Ashley Wood, trying to do a Jack Kirby, trying to do this and that, and a bunch of those influences get mixed together, and they're done poorly, and then they kind of just mutate off on their own, and that's kind of me. And I had this period briefly. There's an artist who I very much admire. His name is Jeffrey Allen Love. He's done a lot of
Mm.
fantasy books and like covers, and he's done some comic books too. And I got, when I saw his style, I was really taken aback. I was like, "This is so beautiful, amazing," and I basically, for like maybe 2 or 3 months, I became a Jeffrey Allen Love clone. I was just doing work. I looked just didn't look like his work, and then eventually it just kind of hit my head. I'm like, I could be the world's second best Jeffrey Allen Love, but I think it'd probably be better to be the best me, even if I'm not
Yeah.
as good as him. Because like, what's the point, right? And I was like, okay.
Hmm.
And that was, it was cool because usually I couldn't imitate anybody. I found somebody I could kind of imitate, and I realized, oh, this is empty. This is not where I want to go. And so then I started, like, whenever I was drawing, if I do something really weird that was cool, and I couldn't figure out, like, I couldn't open into autopsy and go, this is part this, part that. I would just pursue that more and more, and eventually, more of the weird stuff became what I just do, and I was like, oh, great. And so I like the artists I love. Like I love people who, like, if you saw like a Mike Mignola shrubbery, it's Mike Mignola shrubbery. Or you saw like a tile roof from Frank Miller. There's no, that's Frank Miller's tile roof. I want to be that guy where, like, you see a McMillan refrigerator, it, and like
Yep.
that's where I want to get to. It's all visual language. I have a complete alphabet. So people, if they want to rip me off, they can go, well, I draw bicycles like Tony McMillan does, or something like that. That'd be cool. I haven't got there yet. That's kind of the dream at this point.
No, I could see that, and I could see that angle that you're going with on your art as well. I mean, seeing your art, I mean, it stands out to me. It stands out right away. And like, even when I was looking at your inking, immediately, and it's funny that we say this and that we're talking now. But I was watching you drawing at IC3, and I think it was the drink and draw night. We're all hanging out, and I was kind of getting some footage for CWS to post stuff. And yours is one of the ones I came across, and I was like, man, the inking is dope. And I was like, I've seen that inking somewhere. I got to check it out. And then at the show, we were talking at your table, and I was like looking at your stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna rip this off. Like, I'm gonna test this out. I'm gonna get a pen, and just like, that's why I immediately asked you. I was like, what tools are you using? And you showed me, and there's actually there's an, I forget the pen I have, but it's very chiseled like that. And when I started inking, I was very attracted to that chiseled feel and what I could do with it. And seeing you do that was like clicking in my head. I was like, I was attempting to do something like that, and it didn't make sense to me because I didn't see anything similar. But looking at your art gave me like the thought process. I was like, I'm gonna go back to that pen and fuck around a little bit more and see what I could spit out, and it'll be my, you've inspired me, and now I could channel that and see how it comes out through my hand. And that's the coolest part when you're inspired by someone. study it, try to attempt it, try to mimic it. And then, you're going to shape it and you're going to build a little part of it. And it's going to be part of your art that's unique to you as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I still have people I look at and I'm still inspired by. And it's funny, as I get more into comics, more and more the inspiration is is the panel layout and the way they're telling stories. And that's something I thought I appreciated. I did appreciate it as a reader, but making comics I really appreciate it a lot more now, where I could just go look, oh wow, look at this, look at these like 10 panels arranged this certain way. This works. Why does this work? And I can really try to figure that out. And that's been kind of cool as a guy who makes comics now, is to kind of think about it like that. But the thing of the pen, what I love about the pilot parallel pen and also a lot of chisel tip pens is to put it back in the musical terms, to me it's like playing guitar with distortion, like cranked. Like the ink is
Yeah.
going to flow, it's going to get messy, and
Mhm.
you can play guitar the same acoustic or electric with distortion, but if you're gonna play with a lot of distortion, you might as well embrace that, because that's what's
Mhm.
cool about it. And so like I when I'm playing with that pen, I'm like, oh, this is just like drowned in distortion. This is sludge like rock. Let's go nuts with that. And then in the contrast, if I play with like the edge of the pen and get the fine line, you can do some more soft, pretty stuff, which you can do like the Pixies, like clean, loud thing over and over again. So that's really fun for me to kind of mess with that, and that's really opened me up when I got that pen, because I before that I had used crow quills and some brushes and other things, and things are fine, but it didn't really like speak to me. And this was like, oh,
Mhm.
this is what I've been trying. And now when I play with other things, a lot of times will still draw like I'm drawing with the pilot parallel because I'm so used to it, but I usually am drawn towards thicker. Like I love crayons. I love
Ah, nice.
I love big bludgeony things. I love like just
Yeah.
kind of just getting really gnarly with stuff. And it's fun. Like, you can do that. And then once in a while you can do something a little softer and it kind of plays off each other. But what you said, like, yeah, I'm still inspired by people all the time. And the coolest part is you put it into your like, processing unit and it spits out something totally different. And especially when I think the trick is like to have a bunch of influences so they're all mixed together. And then it's like
Mhm.
people can't even figure out like this is cool. Like I have no idea. And you might go, well, I actually know there's like 9 people, they're smashed together, and that's what you're seeing. But now it's its own thing. It's like, eh, there's plenty of bands people can go, well, they're heavily influenced by this and this and that. But especially as a kid, if you don't know any influence, it doesn't matter. This is your first time seeing this. This is
Mhm.
like they are rock and roll to you or whatever, and
Yep.
that's cool. That's totally fine. Like as a kid, I grew up in the '90s. Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, and like Rob Liefeld might as well invented superheroes to me. That's all. They were like,
Yeah,
no one.
yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, cool. Like, so people putting their fists right next to you and like foreshortening. That was them. They invented that. That was all them. And it's cool
I
to
love
learn
that.
that. Yeah, but that's how I felt, and that's fine to feel that way.
Dude, and I mean, when I was studying music, I was really into like prog metal and prog, I played in prog bands, even though I grew up as like a punk kid and everything.
Oh wow, you
But
went like all
I
the way.
Yeah, all over the place. And I studied classical in school so I could learn how to like shred better. And there's this band called Between the Buried and Me. And
Yeah.
around my last year of high school, the album Colors came out, and it was my first album I really got to hear by them. And the song Ants in the Sky, just like that defined music for me, because they pulled all these musical styles and all these influences and made the craziest prog metal song ever. That's just like beautifully composed as well. And that's how I approached all my projects at that point. I was like, I need to learn everything so I can put an output that can, I could call upon things whenever I need it. And whenever, just like when you're jamming and just when you're doing anything kind of in life, like you call upon experiences and things, and that way you could get through a situation. Storytelling to me has always been survival information. So the more information I know how to survive, the better I will be in a certain situation. And so, learning classical and bluegrass and like punk and everything, I would get my 6 string bass and then do a thumb technique I learned from Victor Wooten and Evan Brewer, punk rock like speed bass lines, but like on a very melodic kind of style and everything. You're getting all these essences. nobody realizes what you're doing, but it becomes your style at that point. And
Right.
people forget you could pull from all this, and no one's gonna. Some people will be like, "Oh, there's some Kirby influence, there's some Miller influence, there's this and that," but who's gonna say every defining layer of your influences that have created you? You know that, and you've created this new system, and now it's a new, breath of art and way of, like, creating comics and music. And that's the cool part. Draw upon everything and let your body just like figure out a way, and your mind and your hand to like see how it lays out on the page and what it creates. People shouldn't shy away from that, or shouldn't shy away from, declaring what influences them and going out to their boundaries to learn stuff.
I totally agree. And I think maybe, I don't know, some people, maybe they're afraid it'll appear like, I don't know, contrived or calculated, but
Yeah.
I think no, I'm just showing you what I like, basically. And I sometimes
Yep.
I like these things all together, or I just thought they'd be interesting together. And I think that's a, like you talked about with music too. Like um when I write music, I don't think most people. I'm not thinking like, well, the plan is to do a song like this in the guise of this kind of group. So no, I'm just what's happening. I'm playing. I'm literally
Yeah.
playing. I'm just having fun or expressing myself, and I think that's where the fun art comes from. And also, what's cool about indie comics too is they are indie comics. Like there's no one who's like, I gave you 20 grand to make this book and you didn't make it the way I wanted to. It's like, no, no one did. So just do anything you want. And it's funny to see sometimes. I feel like some people's ceiling of what is possible is like, well, if it's this or this and that, then it's not comics. I'm like, no, it's basically almost, you can almost do anything in its comics. It's sequential art. Like it really is. You could just go crazy with this thing. I'm not saying
If
you have
there's
to make some.
writing and pictures, it's probably a comic. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Yeah.
or
And I'm not saying you have to make like some amazing, like difficult to read homework or Chris Ware type of like thing, but you could do something crazy. You could do something
Mhm.
unexpected. You might as well do something that's exciting for you. That's how I feel.
and
And I think
scary.
there's
You know
lots of,
what I mean?
yeah,
Diving
you're
into that
right.
fear where you're just uncertainty, and just like what you're saying, just letting it go. Once you learn how to kind of just let go and just let it happen, that's when you're going to be able to release it. Just express yourself, just like, make the wrong notes, make the mistakes, like fiddle around a little bit. I think, a big part of like social media is like, it always feels like we're on camera. It always feels
Right.
like someone's watching us, that we need to post our updates, we need to post our artwork, and, show the world and everything immediately. And I feel like sometimes a lot of people, and then me and myself included, I feel like there's somebody over my shoulder whenever I work on anything, even though there's no one in this house except for my cats and dog. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that's just me. But like overcoming that, like no one's gonna see this until I'm done with it, or I need to work on it. Like breathe, make those mistakes, fiddle around, spend all day on one panel or one page. You're working at your own pace to figure it out, and that's when you're gonna let go and enjoy it. Just have fun.
And that's something I'm thinking about now, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself. But I have one of my books is going to be re-released through Mad Cave, and it'll be in stores everywhere. And so this will be my first like mainstream debut in a lot of ways. And so I've luckily embraced some level of obscurity and enjoyed the liberation that of like, well, who cares? Like, I mean, I have some people who like my stuff, and that's really good. I'm getting a cult audience, but I am a little curious to see if I do get a bigger audience, if that will hopefully it doesn't like freak me out and make me like second guess myself. I'm happy that it's I've done comics for like 7 or 8 years, and so I kind of have built in my habits already. But it will be weird to have expectations if that's what happens. I
Oh yeah.
It'll be weird 'cause my book Attaboy, I released it myself about 4 years ago. I did a Kickstarter and self-published it, and I was really happy with it. And that's the book that's coming out through Mad Cave now. And so I'm a little curious. I'm like, oh, it'd be really weird if like people really did like it, and then the next one I do, there's like actual like, so I'll feel some weird pressure, like, oh my god, don't screw this up. People are depending on you. But I'm fairly practical, and I think I'll just be like, well, it's just comic books. It's okay. It's okay.
I share that very mutual feeling like with any project Apollo takes on and kickstarts and helps and releases. Like I was terrified I was terrified for the Punk anthology, I was terrified for Cybersync, I was terrified for the Shadow anthology, I was terrified for Hyperforce. Even with the show Inspired Inc., going to IC3 and having people come up to me and say, I love the show, I've been watching every episode, trip me out. Like the fact that we do have listeners and we do have a great following and great support system by, all these creators that check out this show every week, twice a week that it comes out, it meant the world to me. And it just absolutely baffled me. And it was a little overwhelming. And I was telling my girlfriend, like, I was like, it's crazy. Like, five people have walked up and I've never had this happen before, like I don't know how to
Right.
react, but being polite and just saying thank you, it means the world to me that you even watch it. But that extra, just addition of like people and approach and like expectation I have to have, and I want to grow and become a better host, and I want our guests to always be great and always have fun and come back and everything. It keeps on heightening the level of like expectations and knowledge I want to have. And it's intimidating and it's a challenge, but like you live for this type of thing,
Well,
like this
yeah,
is
and
what we chase.
I think what's cool too is like we're lined up for comic book fame, which is the best kind of fame because it's only famous and only matters to like a really small group of people. So you can just like go to the grocery store and just chill out. But every once in a while, you want to feel good about yourself. You go to a con and people are like, oh, like go nuts, maybe. That's like the best version of fame, and maybe some money. But so I think we figured it out. Like, luckily, the music thing didn't work out great because that's the fame you can't get away from. You know,
Yeah.
like if you're Josh Homme, you can't just go to like a Whole Foods and get some watermelon or whatever. Someone's going to spot you. So, but now, like I'm sure like John Byrne or whatever can go anywhere he wants unless
Oh,
he goes to San Diego Comic-Con. People freak out.
yep. There you go. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Frank Miller's pretty, easygoing in most streets until he gets to like a comic book area where
It's,
he really does get caught. Like,
he's just a man in a fedora walking
yeah.
around looking suspicious. He's not here to do anything. Yeah.
I'm sure
It'd
there's
be
not a lot
amazing
of
to
people that want to approach him. Like,
It'd be amazing to see him in real life, just doing anything, especially in the full regalia. Like I'd be like, what? I'm like, oh, that's just
just
Frank Miller. He's
choosing his avocados, just seeing how firm they are. You know what I mean? Like just
it's
casual
just grandpa.
stuff.
It says Grandpa Batman. He's fine.
Buying his underwear at Walmart. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. That's what I want to see Frank Miller doing. Those are the daily adventures I want to see.
That's the show you gotta
Um,
make. Is just like this follow comic creators doing normal stuff, just surveil them.
yes,
I'd be way into that.
comics, the real life, the understanding the backgrounds and all. Oh man, Tony, dude, this has been an awesome and very enlightening. I can't believe we've already been talking for an hour at this point. But just such an exciting conversation, dude.
Thanks,
So
man.
much insight, so much cool stuff. And I'm glad it resonates so well between each other. And I think everyone listening is going to enjoy this so much. So I got to thank you for your time. I got to thank you for everything you've been doing for indie comics and really making indie comics definable by like how unique they can be, and you really give that a lot of color and actually a lot of ink. To be honest, you give it a lot of ink and you give it a lot of definition, and what you're doing right now really stands out. And I think it's the more exposure you get, it's going to inspire a lot of creators. So why don't you tell us like where we can find you and what you're up to for the rest of 2024?
First off, thank you very much, Brandon. That was all extremely kind of you to say. I really do appreciate all that. But yeah, what am I doing? So I'm basically my book Attaboy is going to come out in end of May through Mad Cave. You can pre-order it now in any comic shop or any Barnes and Nobles. It's going to be everywhere. Hopefully, it does huge and people care. I'm proud of the book, but I'm also working on I think after that I'll do a Kickstarter for my book Serious Creatures, the second half of that, so that's issues 7 through 12. I'll do a collection, a trade paperback of that, and that'll be printed through Comics Wellspring like always because I love their stuff. And that'll be on a Kickstarter. That's my collection about the special effects industry in the 70s and 80s. It's a story of Bobby Feckle. It's almost like a Goodfellas or Boogie Nights, but about special effects guys. And so that's the rise and fall of practical effects from like Jaws on to like Jurassic Park, basically. And so that collects that story, and that's finished. And then I'm working behind the scenes on a sequel to my first comic book, Lumen, which is also printed through Comics Wellspring. And Lumen, the sequel is going to be called Destroying Angel Lumen. And it's I'm like 30 pages in. It's really nuts. It's just full on, just nonstop like mushroom monsters and lantern fights, and it's very weird, very action packed and frantic. And so if you like the first Lumen, I believe this is like the road warrior to Lumen's Mad Max.
Ooh,
This is like
yes.
everything just up 10 notches. So that'll probably be out next year. But that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at that. I'll be at Heroes Con.
Yes.
I'm very excited to hopefully, I'll see you again at some con or something, man. It'd be cool.
Hopefully, I might be at Heroes Con. I'm finding out. We'll get some details. CWS tells me about the week before, and then I'm gonna be at a show. We'll figure it out.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, awesome, Tony. Dude, this has been great, man. I can't wait to hang more.
Same.
And we're working on doing a live drawing show soon, so I'd love to get you on that and
Oh,
do
cool.
some
Yeah.
fun live stuff. I think it'll teach all of us some cool things, and we'll have a blast there.
Oh, yeah, fun.
But until then, hopefully Heroes Con too, dude. If we hang out there, that'll be a blast. Even better. But I mean, honestly, until then, thank you so much, dude. You've been a blast. I can't wait to connect more. And to all of our listeners and watchers and subscribers, thank you so much for supporting the show. It means the world to us. Just there's gonna be a pause. I think the pause has already happened in April. I think we already took the week off by the time this comes off. All right, cool. But as always, thanks for hanging. Stay creative and stay inspired. Looking for high quality printing, fast turnaround, and the industry's best customer service? Look no further than Comix Wellspring. Trusted by thousands of indie comic creators, Comix Wellspring has proven to be the go-to comic book printer. So when you're ready to bring your comic books to life, go to comicswellspring.com and be sure to check out one of the best platforms to sell your physical and digital comics online, the CWS Bookstore. Remember to subscribe, hit that notification bell to see our lives come out twice every single week on YouTube and podcast platforms. And also tag us when you share your favorite episodes and moments from the show. And remember, creators, thanks for hanging, keep creating, and stay inspired.
Comics with